Earlier, the Washington Post broke news that Donald Trump had a number of private meetings with Vladimir Putin without anyone else on the American side in the room. No aides, no interpreter, no one who could basically make a record of the conversation that was taking place or the conversations that were taking place. Now we find through a report by Financial Times that Donald Trump also had a meeting with Putin in Buenos Aires at the tail end of the G20 summit. Now, this was last year in November. According to Financial Times, the White House has acknowledged the two leaders met in Buenos Aires after Trump canceled former bilateral talks following Russia's November attack on 3 Ukrainian naval vessels. So Trump was, in essence, forced to cancel that meeting because of the conflict with Russia and Ukraine. But he still met with Putin, and he did it behind closed doors without a US aide with him, without anyone taking record or taking note of the conversation taking place. According to a Russian government official's account, the two leaders spoke for about 15 minutes about a number of foreign policy issues, including the Azov Sea incident, which is what I was referring to earlier, and the conflict in Syria. They also discussed when they would have a formal meeting. So the timing here is important because this 15-minute private meeting happened in November, and then Donald Trump announced that he was going to pull troops, American troops, out of Syria around December 19th. This is all in 2018. I just think that timeline matters. We'll see.
Yeah, so this timing matters on a couple other issues too, but that's a great point by Anna. So we were all wondering, why is he pulling out of Syria in a panic? All of a sudden, immediately before he was like, oh, maybe, and the generals were trying to talk him out of it. And then all of a sudden he comes out and says, no, we gotta get out of Syria right now. Almost as if he got orders. And that's not us saying it now, we said it at the time. Look, we want him to come out of Syria, but we said the way that he did it was very curious. And now this timing gives you some clue as to, and back then we were having a discussion about, he had a conversation with Turkey, Russia wants us to withdraw. What were the possible motivations? Now this leans more towards Russia than Turkey or any of the other motivations, but it's just one data point. Okay, now the other curious timing things. So he had said, well, I'm canceling the November meeting with Putin because of what happened with the naval ships that Anna told you about. And then after that, he has this secret meeting with Putin in Buenos Aires when they're at the G20 together. Okay, well, you don't need the formal meeting if you're gonna have an informal meeting. So it turns out you canceling the formal meeting was just a show, was to pretend you were being tough on Russia, but in reality you snuck around and was like, okay, Vladimir, what do you want? What do you want? Okay, so don't pretend you're a tough guy and you cancel talks when you went and had a secret talk with him anyway. Point number 2 on that same issue is, when you have formal talks, well then that is when the US at least has a translator, and you're supposed to have aides in the room with you, staff in the room with you to take notes, to make sure there's no misunderstandings, and that we follow through on what we said. Now, Trump in the past has not done that on occasions because he didn't want anyone on the American side knowing what he's talking to Putin about. In this case, since it's not a formal meeting, he's like, oh, well, the translator didn't happen to be here. I had to just use the Russian translator that Vladimir brought, and Melania. And that's a curious, different thing, okay? Right. And so it's very convenient not to have a formal meeting, but an informal one where only the Russians are present and Trump, because then he has no witnesses. You know who tries to avoid witnesses? Criminals.
So we're not the only ones that are concerned about what took place during that closed-door private meeting. In fact, National Intelligence Director Dan Coats was asked about this recently, and here was his reaction.
Donald Trump met privately with Vladimir Putin, and no one in the US government has the full story about what was discussed. Director Haspel and Director Coats, would this put you in a disadvantaged position in terms of understanding Russia's efforts to advance its agenda against the United States?
This is a sensitive issue, and it's an issue that we ought to talk about this afternoon. I look forward to discussing that in a closed session.
In other words, I don't want to say publicly how much Trump has damaged us by not allowing any other Americans to hear what he's saying to a foreign adversary. and to not even have a translator from our side. So I don't know what Dan Coats said in the closed door hearing, but he thought it was an important and sensitive issue that the public shouldn't know about yet. So that is very telling. And it's also very telling when you don't, look, if I'm going to deal with anybody else, I want my own translator in a business meeting, let alone if I'm the American president. And why wouldn't I want my own translator? Why would I trust a Russian translator? What a weird thing to do unless you're absolutely insistent that there be no witnesses. And so, and remember, in previous cases, he has also told the translator not to come into the room with Putin. And in one instance, he came out of a meeting and took the translator's notes.
Right, and said, do not talk about the meeting with
anyone.
And
do not ever talk about this meeting.
Right.
Oh, it's so obvious, come on, you know who tries to avoid witnesses. You know that, if you're breaking the law, you don't want any witnesses. All right, by the way, I don't know what Melania's role is, and now there's a lot of speculation online, I'm not gonna get into that. But I do know that he has put her in legal jeopardy by having her attend that meeting. So, I mean, she doesn't have to speak Russian because the translator is presumably translating obviously back into English so Trump can understand. So Melania can hear everything that's being said. Now she's in legal jeopardy for, that is such a foolish thing to do.
I know, but I don't think you're assuming, but he doesn't care about the people around him and what kind of legal jeopardy he puts them in. I mean, think about the number of people associated with Donald Trump who have already faced the legal ramifications of being associated with someone like him.
Yeah, last two things here. One is also about timing, but in a different context. The timing of how long the meeting took. Trump said the meeting was very brief and it was just like, no cordial greetings at the summit as he would do with any other leader. The Argentinian press said, no, that is not true. The meeting, they sat down and the meeting took some time, definitely over 10 minutes. Now people from our administration, the US administration, are saying, no, the meeting took at least 15 minutes. Trump was not telling the truth about how brief it was. Gee, I wonder why you would lie about how substantive the meeting was that you didn't want anyone else to witness. Look, I don't care if you're on the right wing or the left wing. If you can't see that this guy's trying to hide some relationship with Russia, you're being purposely obtuse. And so if you want to deny reality for whatever political reason that you have, that's your choice. But every other rational person in the world can see that Trump has some deal with the Russians that he doesn't want anyone else to hear about. Thanks for watching this free clip of the Young Turks. Don't forget to become a TYT member today. For more exclusive content, join now at tyt.com/join.